Welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I am your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate, the CEO and founder of Command Your Brand. You can find out more about us over at www.commandyourbrand.com. Reminder, if you guys are brand new to this show, to like this video, leave us a comment and smash the subscribe button if you want to command your brand. And guys, I'm very excited for today's guest because I had the pleasure of recording an episode for his show recently. And man, I just love his vibe. I love everything he's doing. And I was excited to dive into things to him today. So Drew Dinkelacker, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
So you have a show called the Marketing Accelerator. You have a really cool concept behind it. But before we get into that, what you're doing out there, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, man.
Super. Well, I started my business in September of 2001. And for those that might remember, that was a lousy month to start a business.
Yes.
September 11th. Yeah. It was tough.
It's the only day I ever forgot my gym clothes in my entire life. So there we go.
Right. The world changed that day, and in more ways than one, I started a business. So, yeah, and everything was different after that. But it was all good. And hey, it's 2024, so that's been 23 years that this has been my vocation in the world. This is what I do full time. And so it basically I am what I would call a scout to business leaders. I help them figure things out. I help them decide where opportunity is. I can show them where that opportunity is. And if they like the concept, then I lead their team to that opportunity. And by the time the team gets there, he's got something else for me to do. Those were my previous job descriptions I wrote, and that's what I did. And I realized that's a business. And so I do that for business owners, helping them make better marketing, strategic marketing decisions, build confidence in their marketing. And I help turn their marketers into marketing leaders through a series of products and things.
So I do want to talk about the concept behind your show, Drew, but the first thing I wanted to do is, you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording that, you've actually had a interesting bunch of twists and turns to kind of get where you are now. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think far too often people may look at what they're doing and they think that thing has to be the thing, right? Like this has to be the thing. It has to work out. Like success or failure is on what we see on social media. Everything's always successful. Nothing seems to fail. Mm-hmm. And I guess looking at it, what has it been like for you to, go through the different paths you've been through to actually, work in the business you're in today?
Super question. And you're right. People see what you put out and it's refined, and they don't see all the ugly that went into it before it got to the refined. And, that's just life and everything. So I think what's relevant here in my business is that, I spent my first decade of work was in video production. I was college, I was communication arts, radio and TV major, worked in video production, produced, direct, lit. I married the set designer, and you can't really see much of the set, but she designed the set. And this is actually a functional place. That's not a virtual background. This is a working set here.
This is real barnwood. So I feel you. It's not just a screen behind me.
No. I've been down here. I'm in my basement. Just saying.
I too am in my basement. So that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can prove it. There are the windows. I believe in transparency. So anyway, I had this video production career. Loved it. It was great fun. Started having kids. It's like we worked crazy hours. My wife worked for the company as well. And I needed to get something more stable. So then I shifted into healthcare marketing and management. Did that for 10 years. And then came the opportunity to start my own thing in marketing consultant. And I had a lot of people asking me, telling me, you should start your own business. You should start your own business. You should be a marketing consultant. It's like, okay, fine. That's a whole nother story. But here's what's interesting though, is, I launched in 2001. I didn't want to have a cookie cutter solution to the marketplace. I wanted to be able to do custom work for clients. And after about 2 years, I discovered all my clients had the same problems. So then that business started out as the D&D group. Then it quickly we moved our house, and the D&D group was a terrible name. I didn't think it would last, but it did. So it's like, okay, I got to make something else out of this. So then we became Teakwood Marketing because we moved on to Teakwood Avenue. It was like, I could get that teakwoodmarketing.com. It's like, great. Okay. These are not scientific decisions, perfect decisions. It's what can you work
I
with?
think that's an interesting point though, Drew, because I think a lot of people yeah, sure, surveys are the key to good statistics, but I think a lot of times people think that market research goes into everything. And it's like, life isn't always that way, right? Like, you know what I mean? It can be more difficult than you think.
Right. And we looked at a house one street over, which was on Whittakin, is the name of the street, and Whittakin Terrace. And we didn't buy that house. We bought the house at Teakwood. We named the business Teakwood. My daughter, who's like 14 at the time, goes, "Good thing we moved on to Teakwood, Dad, not Whittakin, because Whittakin marketing just doesn't sound near as good."
Love that.
But you work with what you got, and so as I wanted to address the problem that every client was having, I wrote this workbook I called it the Marketing Accelerator workbook by Teakwood Marketing. And that workbook came with me. It was my process and this was like 2006 or so. And I started working with clients that way. They really liked the whole concept of the Marketing Accelerator. Oh my gosh, that kind of took off. So I don't know, it's like in 2010 or so, I bought marketingaccelerator.com for $1,000. And, those are just decisions you make. And I started doing
I feel your pain, by the way, because our current domain, like, we just had a domain, like, and what do they call them? Like domain sitters, like people that just have a whole bunch of domains and sit on them.
Yep.
And basically had no purpose to use it whatsoever, but is like, so for a whole bunch of money, you might be able to have it.
Right. So, and at the time, I felt like $1,000 was a fair amount of money. That's only gone up in value, though. I can tell you that. But so what happened? I did a lot of fractional CMO work for a while, which was great. I launched marketing roundtables in 2015. I wrote my book, which is back here. You can't lead what you don't understand, and that book is kind of the synopsis of my philosophy. And then I had a course I launched with that. I launched a second round table. I tried in 2018. I tried launching a third round table in 2019, failed. Tried launching that one twice, failed twice. So it's none of these things were perfectly launched or anything like that, but you just start to build. And so things are going good. Just doing CMO work, doing client work. I did the roundtables to have one-to-many revenue versus one-on-one revenue. That combo was working good. And then March 2020 hit. 2 retainers gone, canceled. They were both scheduled to be renewed for a year and just gone. And then, everything just kind of flatlined because of COVID. So what are you going to do? Well, video background. I don't know. I've been on camera before. I don't know. We'll try this podcasting thing. And I didn't want to put a lot of time and effort into it. And most of the podcasts I listened to were too long and took way too much time to get their points across. And a lot of times there was no point. It was just people talking. I hated those. And so I wasn't going to do that. So I decided to do the opposite and condense it. So with COVID, it started out, I called it 3. And the concept started right off the bat. It was 3 insights in 3 minutes, but I just called it 3. And I started podcasting. These were ugly podcasts, just terrible podcasts.
My first podcasts make me cringe, so I understand.
Yeah. They're not public anymore.
I'm in the same boat, so I fully get it.
Right. And so I would interview clients that I had been working with. Okay, tell me, how are you dealing with COVID? Are you open? Are you just this kind of stuff? Because at the time, those are real issues. Do you have employees coming in? Or is everybody remote? How are you dealing with that? So most most of the time we started with just talking about the status of where you are. Where are you with your product? Can you get, remember the supply chain was all messed up. Could you even be in business? So those were the first integrations of the podcast, was just talking to clients about that. Then what happened is, COVID kind of loosened up a bit. It became, all right, now how are you marketing? How are you marketing today? Because expos aren't happening anymore. People aren't gathering. How are you? You used to be an expo dependent business. How are you doing it? So we would talk about those kinds of things, and that eventually morphed into, well, just talking to marketers about marketing in general. We kind of moved out of the, okay, we don't really talk about COVID anymore. And then I started using it as a lead generator for my roundtables, where I targeted, and I was using a LinkedIn automated connection tool, using it appropriately, not the hate it way that we all get LinkedIn messages.
Well, I
And
think there's very tasteful ways to use those things, right? Like I
there
think
are,
other people treat your LinkedIn inbox like the one of those posting boards outside of the grocery store where they have
right,
like you can get puppies and stuff like that.
right, right, and that's what's going to happen with Chat GPT and AI. We're already seeing it.
Yeah.
Is this one guy I know said with Chat GPT, there's just Chat GPT and AI is just going to make more noise in the marketing marketplace. It's just going to have better grammar.
Well, think about this. Like I just as a side note, think about this, right? Like you have one person that has an AI bot that writes posts for them, right?
Mhm.
You have another person that has an AI bot that does engagement for them. So you
Mhm.
have an AI bot that does posting engaging with an AI bot that does engagement. No humans involved.
Yeah. Where is this all going to go? I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't
continue.
know. I don't know. But I eventually morphed my podcast into a lead generation tool that I would ask marketers, "Hey, do you have a good story to tell? I'm looking for interesting insights for my podcast." Well, I mean, come on, that's like selling crack to drug addicts. They're marketers. They want to tell their story. And so I
Yes.
got introduced to a lot of marketers that way and got a whole lot of marketing insight. And then we decided, okay, so here's another interesting thing. I was using Kajabi as the platform that my course sits on.
Mhm.
It's just one of those platforms out there, and then you can do email
Yeah.
and you can do different things with that. And they came out with a podcast product. And I thought, previous to this, I just would send out it via email and post it on my YouTube channel and on my website. But they had a podcast product. So that added Spotify, what was Google Podcasts, now YouTube, and Apple Podcasts to the platform. So we just started putting it out that way and in expanding the footprint.
Mhm.
And so that really gave a lot more robustness to the whole platform. And when we moved it there, I couldn't use 3 as a title anymore. It didn't work. You had
Why
you,
not?
you- um, the person I was working with said that's just, you're going to be really hard to find. It's
That's
not
true.
specific enough. And so that's where we said, okay, it'll be the Marketing Accelerator podcast. And then the subheading is featuring 3 insights in about 3 minutes. And so
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 let
that's
me
how those are just all the little decisions that come along, and wasn't really planning on all that, but it worked out well.
Well, so here's the question I have because I love the concept. It's a
Mhm.
it's a very cool show the way it comes together.
Thank you.
And I think the thing that's interesting though is people think 3 minutes, 3 things, like, oh, that's such an easy show to put together. But I think what's actually happened is and you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like outside looking in, it looks like your show actually takes a bit more work than some hour podcasts to put together because you're really trying to make sure that like you get the right stuff, you don't waste people's time. I'm curious for you, like, what does that process look like in actually creating a show that's
Mhm.
3 things in 3 minutes?
Sure. I'm happy to share that. So it starts out with when I talk to marketers, I always ask them what are their superpowers. And
Mhm.
and it's just what you naturally do. And my superpower, which I've made a business out of, is making the complex simple. Or as a client told me one time, Drew, you make the obscure obvious.
The world
So
could use a lot more of that, by the way.
yeah. Well, yesterday was the presidential debate, and I just posted something about, oh, here's my 6 observations from the debate, and you can decide whether or not you agree with them or not. But I've already gotten feedback. It's like, that was very concise. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, is help people make sense of their world. So with my podcast, I require a 30-minute pre-planning session. And I had one person push back on me and say, you mean it's a 3-minute podcast? What do we need 30 minutes for? And it's like,
Well, I'll add a
exactly.
caveat to that though, Drew, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people, and this is why your show is different. I think a lot of people use a pre-call to be lazy. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Whereas you use it because you're actually building a show. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep. Because we have a brand promise. One, it's 3 insights in about 3 minutes. That means we will never, ever go over 3 minutes and 59 seconds. That is a brand promise. So in order to do that, we have to be well planned out. So I use this 30-minute session. I'm very good at, and I took you through this process, Jeremy.
Yes.
What's unique about you? What's interesting? How can I leverage this? What has my market not heard? And how can I piece this together? So ultimately, in the process of our discussion with each other, I
Mhm.
came up with, oh, here's 3 interesting nuggets that Jeremy talked about. So
How
then,
many iterations did it take you to get to that? Like you, because you mentioned like you really have it down of like, these are the things I need to ask. But I imagine like maybe there are different iterations that got you to that. Does that make sense?
you know, I've done this often enough now that I know at the end of the podcast pretty clearly, here's the 3 insights. And this is just I'm sorry, I said podcast, during the pre-planning.
Okay.
During that 30 minutes, I'm pretty sure about, here are the 3 insights. Sometimes people might have 4 or 5 that I want to leverage, but I only pick 3. And we usually dive into one and we find out there's like one really good point actually has 3 legs, and there's 3 insights there. So that's the 30, that's the pre-planning. But at the end of that session, I know what I'm going to want the guest to say because they've already told me it.
Mhm.
So then the work I do after that is I write up an outline of the 3 questions that I'm going to ask that set up those insightful bullet points. So I end up writing an outline. Here's the question I'm going to ask. Jeremy, here's what you told me about that kind of question. Here's the bullet points. Don't read them, just tell me about them. But I'm going to ask you this question. And sometimes that bullet point, like the last bullet point to the first answer, sets up the next question.
Mhm.
And so that's a bit of the orchestrating and scripting that I rely on from my video production career. But after I've done the 30-minute interview, it takes me 15 minutes to whip that up. But I have the background to do that.
Mhm.
And I've been doing this now for 4 seasons. So I know what makes for a good podcast. So then I send that outline to my guest and say, hey, do I got this right? Does this sound good? Do you want to change anything? Do I have your description as a business correct? We get all that. I also send them the link for scheduling the podcast. So then we do that. They give me some feedback. They rarely change anything. They're very excited about it. And oftentimes I get this kind of feedback. Wow, you're you're going to make me look really good.
Well, the thing I found interesting, and I don't know if you do this with every guest or this is just something that happened with me, is when we recorded the show, you actually did it twice. And the second cut was way better. Is that something you do with everyone, or is it just kind of like I was having a bad day and you wanted to make me look better?
No, I hate to tell you this, Jeremy, but that way we do that with everybody. And you were great. You were great.
And but
But
do you
we
have the
treat
same
things.
experience with
Yes,
a lot
yes,
of guests where the second time is better?
yeah. Even though you're a podcaster,
Yeah.
you relaxed more the second time around.
Mhm.
In 4 years of doing this, I've always done at least 2 takes. There were only 2 people that their first take was as good as their second take.
Mhm.
One guy ran an ad agency, and the other guy was a big CMO at a large company and just was he was just ultra cool. You know, he was just great. And he was different. Each take was different, but the first take was just fine. But everybody's better on the second take. So that's why we always do 2. And then what happens is, because, it doesn't take long to record it, we do it twice. And then as soon as that recording session is over, then I re-record all of my takes, because I might need to set it up a little differently, the question a little differently, even though when it was live, it was fine, but I could set it up even better based on how they responded. Again, relying on my video production and editing background. So then what I have at the end of that podcast is I've got the raw footage with you.
Mm-hmm.
I have my raw footage in a separate file, and then I take that outline and I mark the takes that I want to use on that outline digitally, and we have a shared folder where my editor then goes and bangs it together. They have to have it together 10 days before the due date. We have a production schedule that she checks. She's my daughter. She lives in Orlando. and we send messages to each other via some of this stuff sometimes. And it's just that works really well. She edits it, she sends it back to me, I approve it or make some changes. We used to have to work at getting it under 4 minutes, but we don't anymore. I know what that feels like. And I tell people, don't say thanks for having me. We'll edit it out. I'm not going to say welcome. I'm not going to say goodbye. We just are straight to it.
So let me ask you this, at least the effect for me, like being a podcaster, when I got done, is I'm like, man, I am so intrigued by what this guy does. I need to interview him about it. Does that happen often for you? Because it's a very cool concept and you do it very well.
Well, I appreciate that. I can't say that people are all that interested in learning about how I do it.
I guess it's because I'm a techie then. Like I'm a tech I'm very interested in like the tech of how you do it. It's just very cool.
Well, one observation I had that people have told me with this process that they appreciate is, as I mentioned, one, you're going to make me look really good. I've had to work to make my message more succinct, is what they've told me. And they value that, which is great, because that's kind of part of my shtick, is I walk alongside people and help them improve. But they've also said, I've been on podcasts where they let me talk forever. And it's like, I'm tired of talking. I don't want to talk anymore. And he said, I've had this a couple times. I feel like people are way more likely to listen to your whole program and hear in complete what I have to say than if I'm on some other podcast that goes for an hour, hour and a half. And the feedback was, I feel like that, as far as me getting my guests, my word out there, this is going to more effectively do that more time is not good. Less time focused with more people's focused attention, which is what I'm about. That is our brand. We will deliver 3 insights in 3 minutes. And you're connecting with people when you see people out in the marketplace and they walk up to you, and before they say anything, they go, because that's what I do in the podcast. We feature 3 insights in about 3 minutes. And it's a little disconcerting when people walk up to you and start doing that in your face.
So let me ask you this then, Drew, because like we look at this show, and this show is the Command Your Brand show. And I wanted to have you on because you're somebody that really commands your brand, right? Like you do, at least in my opinion, I think you do a good job at that. And I guess looking at it then, you mentioned the brand promise. And I think that's a big part of commanding your brand, is having and keeping brand promises.
Yep.
And I guess for you, how have you managed to stick to that, right? Like, because it could become 10 insights in 10 minutes, or it could become 3 insights in 35 minutes. Like, how have you managed to stick to that and keep that brand promise? Because it's a very simple one, but a very important one to keep.
You're right. And I one of the things that I do, where this played out, is one of the things that I do is commentary on Super Bowl commercials.
I actually noticed that in your Twitter feed.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm a voting panelist of USA Today's Super Bowl rating of commercials, Super Bowl commercials. And before I started the podcast, I would just blog on Super Bowl commercials. So you could write forever, you could give example commercials and all kinds of stuff. And I had to cross this bridge, and actually it was called the Super Commercial Bowl blog. You know how Super Bowl's really testy about using the word Super Bowl.
Yeah,
so,
they get this whole trademark thing, and
right. So we called it the Super Commercial Bowl blog. I was going to take it as a badge of honor if I got a cease and desist order from the NFL. It's like, yes, I've made it. They want me to knock it off. That never happens. But
I actually had a friend, by the way, that had Think Different in his podcast title, and he got a cease and desist from Apple. So anyway, continue.
Good for him. So anyway, with that, I had to cross that bridge because I have this podcast. It's 3 insights in 3 minutes. Do I leave the Super Commercial Bowl blog? Do I do a video version of that, or do I bring that into the podcast with three minutes? And you're playing commercials. So do you play the whole commercial? So as I looked at it, I decided I liked, it's Marketing Accelerator. We do things fast. Yes, we're going to bring that into the podcast. And I had to figure out how to do it. But again, pulling on my video editing background and messaging background, it's like you really have to work to figure out what are the key points you want to hit, and just hit those, not the other 10 slightly interesting ones. But you got to work through all 10 to figure out which ones are the true peaks. So that's that's just the way my mind works. So once I've set up this branding for the podcast, it's like I know how to break things down. I might do a series, but there's still in about 3 minutes. But I can do a series. And that's what I would do with the Super Bowl, is I would do a series the week of the Super Bowl, but they would all be 3:59 or less.
I feel like the later it's gotten, meaning like, we're in 2024. I feel like the Super Bowl commercials get like more esoteric every year, where you watch it and you're like, what did I just watch? What just happened? So anyway.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things going on there, Jeremy. Sorry to tell you this. One, you're aging each year.
Yeah, man. Okay, so that's an important point. So I'm like, I guess by birth, I'm like what's called an elder millennial. So I'm technically a millennial, but culturally I'm Generation X because of where I was born. So it's very interesting, man. So you are right. I am aging.
Yep. And so I have, I'm not going to remember all 3 of them, but one of the principles I have was, how, I put out a blog post, how to watch Super Bowl commercials like a USA Today ad panelist. And the first one of the points was, if you didn't get the commercial, if you don't get who that celebrity is, all right, the spot wasn't for you. But so ask somebody older, younger, or of a different gender than you if they got it, and to give you some insight, because it just keeps getting more and more and more niched, because it is a massively viewed program. If you look at the top watched programs for the last 20, probably 4 years, the Super Bowl is the Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl is the program. The finale of MASH was up there, and then there was one other thing that was up there. But other than that, it's Super Bowls and division championship games. It just pulls people together. You have parties, you don't have World Series parties that people go to who don't care about the World Series, but there's plenty of parties that people do not care about the Super Bowl, the game. They don't even know the rules, but they're there and the commercials are on. So it's a huge opportunity. That's why I love it, because it's a new crop of commercials. It's about 60 some commercials, national commercials every year. And it's the best minds working on this stuff. So it does amaze me sometimes when you see, what were they thinking? Like somebody thought that was good. I would have loved to have heard the pitch to that client. This is what we're going to do and people are going to love it. So.
And it's going to cost so much money.
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha.
Right. Well, the $7 million for 30 seconds, that's just the airing cost. That's not the production cost,
creative agency, production costs,
or anything like that. They're sinking millions into it. And you can even get a local kind of like we live in the greater Cincinnati area, and I had a client, this was about 10 years ago. He got a 30-second, he's an automotive dealer in town, big automotive dealer. He did a Super Bowl commercial for 30 seconds, cost him $50,000 local. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess to show how disconnected I am culturally, one of my employees a couple years ago had to explain to me who Post Malone was. So, that's typically how explaining things to me goes. Well, Drew, I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. We did not hit 3 insights in 3 minutes. I think we hit 107 insights in 31 minutes. So definitely appreciate it. But for people listening, how can they connect with you? How can they follow you and find out more about what you're doing out there, man?
Appreciate that. Drew Dinkelacker, marketingaccelerator.com. No funky spelling on accelerator, just like your gas pedal, ACCELERATOR.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Subscribe to my podcast. It's a lot of fun. And, who knows, if you got some really interesting insights, I will entertain your idea for a podcast. I'm not promising. Not everybody makes it. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be something I haven't done before. Maybe you can sell me on it, but they certainly can reach out to me via the website. And that'd be great. I would look forward to it, Jeremy.
Very cool. And for those of you out there watching, don't forget to like this video, leave us a comment. And if you want to be like Drew and you want to command your brand, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Have a good one, everybody.